Welcome back to the Let the Good Times Roll podcast. I am your host, Nathan Brown. We're back once again talking about Alabama's women's basketball. Um, they are now in the WNIT tournament, unable to get the nod for the last four in for the NCAA tournament. But they do have a chance to elongate their season and play for a championship, continue to play in the postseason, which I know they're very grateful for, and will look to build a lot of momentum for the program as they go into next season. So on today's episode, I'll talk about a little bit of the things I discussed in my article. We'll go into a deeper dive of maybe why Alabama didn't get into the tournament, as well as how those teams that did make it over them have fared in the tournament, and some of the other teams that were on the bubble, how they've done in the NIT, as well as how Alabama has done in the WNIT, how those teams have done. And if we have time, I will get to why I believe Brittany Davis should have been first team All SEC. She was voted second team All SEC, but I think there was a spot for her on the first team, especially how she played down the stretch. So, first things first, let's just get straight into the bubble. My article, I talked about 8 bubble teams. Of the 8, today I'll talk about 6 of them. The 2 teams that didn't make either the WNIT or the women's NCAA tournament were Missouri and Northwestern. So of the other 6 teams, we have Villanova, Dayton, Missouri State. Those are the 3 teams that made the NCAA tournament. And then we have Alabama, Boston College, and UCLA. Those 3 teams have played in the WNIT and still are continuing to play. So we'll start with Villanova. They've had the most success out of all the bubble teams. They got out the first round with a win. They did have gone to lose to 3-seeded Michigan Wolverines 64-49 in the second round. But I think they did prove that they were worthy of their spot in the tournament. They came in at an 11th seed, and so they beat BYU in the first round 57-61. And so getting that first win, I do believe that validated their being in the tournament. So then you have the other team you had that made the tournament was the Dayton Flyers. They had a first round exit. They did get in as the last 4-in team, but they would go on to lose to the Georgia Bulldogs, and not a particularly close one, 70-54. This is the same Bulldog team that the Crimson Tide went on to beat in the second round of the SEC tournament just days ago. Alabama won that matchup 74-62, so just keep that in mind. Also, we have Missouri State, who also would lose in the first round with a 63-56 loss to Ohio State. I would say that somebody has to win, somebody has to lose, so this isn't saying that they're undeserving of their spot just because they were unable to make it out the first round. But like I said, Villanova, they got at least one win in the tournament, so it showed a little bit more so they were deserving to be in out of those bowl teams. Next, I'll talk about the teams that ended up playing in WNIT, which are Boston College, UCLA, and Alabama. We'll start first with UCLA and Boston College. Both teams have won their first 2 games in NIT, and they could potentially face each other in a quarterfinal round. Right now, they're coming up on matchups in the Sweet 16, and Boston College will play Columbia in New York on, I believe it's Thursday. Yeah, they'll play this Thursday versus Columbia, and UCLA will play this Thursday versus Wyoming. Both teams won, obviously, their first 2 opening matchups, and they did pretty well. Both teams played at home, and so they have been pretty impressive at home during the WNIT. Especially Boston College. Both their wins have been blowout wins. UCLA, they've been able to handle their opponents pretty steadily with a pair of double-digit wins. And so both those, like I mentioned before, both games they both played were on the road. And so now, at home. And so now they'll be going on the road. So we'll see if the tables turn any by them playing on the road, or will they remain consistent and head to that matchup I talked about earlier in the quarter final round where they'll play each other. Alabama, however, has played two nail-biting games. Came down to the wire. They played two games. Their first round game was against Troy. They played at Troy and won in a 79-82 game. Then they played versus Tulane in New Orleans. They won 81-77 to advance to this round, this third round. And now they're about to go back home to play Houston, who they have played once this season. They defeated the Houston Cougars earlier this season, 77-67. So they should give them a little momentum going into this game. But both teams are drastically different coming into this performance. But Alabama does have an advantage going home after being on the road for so long. They haven't played at home since late February. So during the regular season, they fared much better at home than they did on the road. For the sake of this podcast, if all fares well, Alabama will go on to face either Boston College or UCLA. They can't face off in the championship, but it could face off in a semifinal matchup. So hopefully both those teams will be able to, or one of two out of those three teams will be able to remain victorious, and we'll be able to see if they can compete to have a chance to play for that championship and really show who deserves the opportunity to continue postseason play. So with that, I'll wrap up for today. I'll say that coming up for the Crimson Tide, they do have a matchup versus the Houston Cougars, as we mentioned before, and that will take place Thursday, March 24th at 6 p.m. In Colon Coliseum. It'll be the Crimson Tide first game back in a while, and so tickets are just $5. Coach Chrissy Curry is really looking for a lot of support from the hometown fans. So we'll see you next time on Let the Good Times Roll podcast. Thank you.